Just tell us. Okay, welcome everybody to the Native Plant Society of New Jersey's webinar series. Tonight we are very fortunate to have Becky LaBoy. She's the Education Outreach Specialist at the Ocean County Soil Conservation District, and she's also the co-leader of the Jersey Shore chapter of the Native Plant Society. Becky has a master's in education, a bachelor's of science in biology, and over 20 years of experience as an educator. Not only that, Becky is an avid birder, and she enjoys landscaping her own yard with native plants, of course, to attract and support our native birds. So enjoy Becky's presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Karen. And Karen is a co-leader of the Jersey Shore chapter of the Native Plant Society of New Jersey, along with Pam Almeida and Becky Hope Polenberg. So we're excited to be here tonight representing, and thank you so much to the board of the Native Plant Society of New Jersey for inviting me to present this evening's program called Wildlife Friendly Trees and Shrubs for Your Backyard. And that's a wood thrush pictured. And I'm going to start the program. Okay, so a few things to discuss first. The next program for the Native Plant Society of New Jersey is Deer-Resistant Native Plants for Your Garden by Mike Van Cleef, and that's going to be on September 16th at 7 p.m. So that's part of our monthly series, Wonderful Wednesdays. So please join us on September 16th. Also, please consider becoming a member of the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. It's $20 per individual, $25 for family, $5 for student. Membership is good for a calendar year from January through December, and you can go to our website, the homepage, www.npsnj.org, and become a member. You can connect with the Native Plant Society of New Jersey on our Facebook page. Just Google Facebook, Native Plant Society of New Jersey. And the Jersey Shore chapter, we just started a group page on Facebook called Jersey Shore Chapter, Native Plant Society of New Jersey. So you can connect with our chapter there. Or if you have any questions for me or Karen or the Jersey Shore chapter, you can email us at jerseyshore@npsnj.org. Selecting shrubs and trees for your yard can be a really big decision. So I'm glad you're here with me tonight to talk about shrubs and trees for your yard. And it's a decision that you will live with for a long time to come. And the next owner of your house will also live with your decision, since it's likely that the trees we plant today will outlive all of us. But what a wonderful legacy to leave for future inhabitants, both humans and wildlife. Hopefully this program will offer you some information to help make your decision. Throughout my program, I will share some key ideas, beginning with an introduction to trees and shrubs, discussing why they are an important component of our world, and I'll share some information about the natural semblance of trees and shrubs in our New Jersey forests. I'll highlight specific tree and shrub species that I think would make a great addition to your New Jersey yard. And I'll also showcase some important connections between trees and shrubs and wildlife. Trees and shrubs are a really important component of our world. I'm sure you know, they provide so many services to humans, and scientists actually like to call this ecosystem services. So we literally could not live without these services that trees and shrubs provide. It's easy to forget that trees and shrubs produce oxygen in mass quantities, which we need to breathe. They pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and store it as wood, which is basically carbon molecules. This is increasingly important, of course, as we try to combat climate change. Trees and shrubs provide us with food. Almonds, peaches, blueberries, and oranges are some of my favorites. Trees supply us with construction materials for our homes and for furniture. Trees and shrubs provide the catalyst for many modern medicines. And trees and shrubs offer sought-after shade on a hot, sunny day and insulation on cold days, and can even lower our cooling and heating bills. They provide windbreaks and living privacy fences. Humans also benefit from emotional support offered by trees and shrubs, as evidenced by a rejuvenating walk in the woods. In fact, entire wellness and tourism industries promote ecological retreats and vacations, all centered within and around forests. Trees and shrubs increase the value of your home. The value of trees and shrubs to humans is almost immeasurable. Economists actually measure the value of these services to determine the value of forests. And that actually helps lawmakers create important conservation legislation. So it's no wonder that you want to add trees and shrubs to your yard. So New Jersey has so many native species to choose from. I'm very excited to share some with you tonight. In fact, New Jersey is part of a contiguous biome that stretches across the eastern United States called the Eastern Deciduous Forest Region, or the Temperate Eastern Deciduous Forest Region. And it consists predominantly of deciduous broadleaf trees. I'm sure you're familiar with oak, maple, birch, beech, hickory, basswood, and that's just to name a few. These trees have leaves that drop from the branches in the fall, and that's an adaptation allowing for the tree to conserve water and energy in the winter. So the Eastern Deciduous Forest region also has conifer trees. Some are hemlock, spruce, fir, pine, although they're outnumbered by the broadleaf deciduous trees. An exception in New Jersey is our pine plains within the Pine Barrens region of our state, and the dry, rocky outcrops up in northern New Jersey, where there are vast forests of pitch pine. So this map was actually created by Lucy Braun and published in 1950, and it depicts the original or the virgin forest patterns. So if you notice New Jersey, North Jersey and South Jersey are two different colors. So the blue area representing the oak chestnut forest runs through the northern half of New Jersey, and the oak pine forest dominates in the southern half of our state. Unfortunately, we lost the American chestnut tree to chestnut blight many years ago, which completely changed our forests. These large forest regions are further divided into smaller plant communities containing different compilations of different trees and shrubs, as well as vines and wildflowers and grasses and ferns and ground covers. And it's based on other conditions such as the amount of water available, the relief of the land, which is how flat or sloped it is, the proximity to the ocean or river, soils, and many other factors. So if we take a short look at New Jersey's geology, we can see why there are some really big differences in plant communities in the north as compared to the south. New Jersey is divided into four main physiographic regions. In the north, there is the Ridge and Valley, the highlands just below it, then the Piedmont. And in South Jersey, we are completely covered down here. I say we because that's where I live. We live in the coastal plain. The coastal plain is further divided into the intercoastal plain. So you can see it on the map on the right. That green section is the intercoastal plain. It's a thin corridor along the Delaware River which heads northeast, cutting the state in half, and the outer coastal plain covering the pine barrens and reaching the bay and the ocean. So New Jersey is a really small state, but I can't emphasize enough how diverse our state really is in terms of plant communities, and a diversity of plants supports a diversity of wildlife. So one more ecological concept before I share some specific tree and shrub species for your yard. So forests have several layers. The overstory consists of the tree canopy, and the understory consists of the shrub layer. And then the field layer includes subshrubs, flowering perennials, and other herbs. And the ground layer includes low-growing perennials, spreading or trailing vines, ferns, mosses, and other ground covers. So applying this concept of layering to your yard will help to provide habitat to a diversity of wildlife. So ideally, we can plant our yards so that they represent as best as possible the layers of a forest and mimic the ecological concept of a forest community. So trees with spreading canopies provide the overstory, and then tall shrubs provide the base structure of the understory. And then we can mix that with our beloved flowering perennials and our native grasses and ground covers. So these homeowners, Debbie and Adrian, whose yard I'll feature a few more times in the program, they also added bird feeders, nest boxes, small water features such as bird baths, large branches sticking vertically up in the ground for birds to perch, and other natural ornaments that provide elements found in nature that sometimes need to be supplemented within our yards. And they not only added a creative and decorative touch, these natural features provide places for animals to hide and seek protection, to relax, to roost, and to find enjoyment. So I'm going to start by sharing a tree species that provides a bounty of services for wildlife. It's one of my favorite trees, and this is eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana. And like so many other trees and shrubs, it provides a home for wildlife, a place to build a nest and raise a family. So this endangered yellow-crowned night heron family is nesting in an eastern red cedar rookery. Yellow-crowned night herons are one of many species of large wading birds sharing this resource, and it's located in Ocean City, New Jersey. It's growing in a salt marsh between the mainland and the barrier islands. And the night herons share the rookery with this family of great egrets and with these juvenile glossy ibis who learn to fly within their safe entanglement of Virginia creeper vines. And eastern red cedar also provides food for wildlife. This fish crow is plucking juniper berries from this eastern red cedar. You can plant this beautiful, easy to grow tree in your yard, or you can wait for the seeds to be dispersed by the birds, including the American robin or this yellow-rumped warbler. Many birds depend on this tree's berries for food, especially in the winter when the berries are abundant and persist throughout the colder months. And the birds in turn provide the important service of seed dispersal, insurance for woodlands. It is common in both the coastal plain region of New Jersey, along the coast on barrier islands, and in the uplands of both northern and southern Jersey. So not only is it native throughout our state, its nativity extends the entire eastern half of the United States. And it is one of the first trees to occupy disturbed soils, making it an early successional tree. And although it will tolerate some shade as a sapling, it needs sunlight as it matures. The eastern red cedar not only provides dinner for some birds, it provides a dining table for others. So tucked safely within the evergreen boughs, this northern saw-whet owl expels a pellet before eating her next meal. Dense branches create a thick and protective canopy for shelter, for roosting, for nesting, and for eating. Red cedar makes an excellent privacy screen and can be used as an alternative to commonly planted arborvitae. This row of eastern red cedars hides the unmowed field behind the lawn. And they grow at a slow to medium pace and are long-lived. And I planted these trees, this row of eastern red cedar, about 15 years ago or so. No, actually probably closer to 10 years ago. Eastern red cedar is not a true cedar, it's a juniper, and the berries are commonly called juniper berries, although they are actually unusually shaped cones. And this tree is dioecious, and dioecious means that it has separate male and female plants, and you'll need one of each in your yard or in the neighborhood for the female to produce the berries. And male trees produce brown structures called strobili that offer pollen, and female trees have round blue strobili with soft scales that coalesce into this round berry-like fruit that ripen in the fall, and as you saw, are very attractive to numerous species of birds. The reddish-brown bark exfoliates in thin, shreddy strips on mature trees and is used by cardinals as nesting material. Eastern red cedars are considered a small to medium tree, reaching heights of 20 to 50 feet. The lower branches can be pruned, creating a shady space below. It grows in dry, sandy soil, tolerating a wide range in pH, from acidic to neutral to alkaline. This species tolerates deer, drought, nutrient-poor soil, salty conditions, and air pollution. Another ubiquitous conifer native to New Jersey is the pitch pine, Pinus rigida. It dominates the pine barrens of South Jersey, as well as the highest ridge tops in North Jersey, such as the Kittatinny Mountain, Barefoot Mountain, and Green Pond Mountain, where pitch pine is the most abundant tree. Both of these locations have very dry, sandy, acidic soil, and both areas are prone to forest fire. So the pitch pine's extremely thick bark is a protective shield from that heat. Bark is unique to trees and shrubs, as well as woody vines. It's the outer covering on the trunk, branches, twigs, and even on woody roots. This outer layer is composed of dead, corky cells that protect the rest of the stem. The inner bark, called phloem, is a living, spongy layer growing just inside the outer bark, and the phloem moves the sugars and other important substances from the leaves to the stem, roots, and other parts of the plant where they're needed. And inner bark eventually grows outward, dies, and becomes part of the outer bark. Numerous bugs hide in the cracks and crevices of the bark, but this red-bellied woodpecker has just the right tools to extract them. Pitch pine is commercially available. It's low maintenance and easy to grow in nutrient-poor soil. It prefers full sun and is extremely drought tolerant. It's often shunned as a backyard tree because of its irregular growth patterns and because of those interesting adaptations to fire. It has epicormic buds on the trunk that sprout into new branches, giving the trunk a furry appearance. This unique habit is shared only with pond pine, native to the southernmost portion of New Jersey and down the southern coastal regions of the US. Pitch pine is considered a medium-sized tree, reaching heights from 40 to 60 feet tall, and with enough room in your yard to grow, it can form a shapely rounded crown. Wouldn't you like to have a peregrine falcon come for dinner? This majestic bird sits at her pitch pine dining table, enjoying duck foie gras. So pines are divided into two different groups, the white pine group and the yellow pine group. Pitch pine is a member of the yellow pine group, which shares characteristics including stiff needles in bundles of 2 or 3. And the pitch pine has 3 needles per bundle or fascicle, like the tines of a pitchfork. And cones in the yellow pine group are broad with thick woody scales, each containing a sharp prickle at the scales tip. And many of the cones on the pitch pine are serotinous, which means they only open after they are subject to extreme heat of a fire. So this actually protects the seeds inside, and after the fire, the cones open up and release the seeds on a fresh layer of rich ash. But not all the cones on the pitch pine are serotinous. Many open up without the extreme heat, making their seeds available to local wildlife. And this native red squirrel does not have time to wait for the cone to open, fire or no fire. It peels off the scales one at a time to find a nutritious snack. This red-breasted nuthatch has a tiny, slightly upcurved bill. She uses it like a lever or a crowbar to extract the seeds from the cone. Success. A hollowed out pitch pine is coveted real estate for cavity nesting birds, such as this Carolina chickadee. She is cleaning out the wood debris inside as she prepares the nursery. She'll line her nest with soft materials, such as moss or fur she finds on the forest floor, left behind by other mammals with whom she shares the woodland or backyard habitat, such as this eastern cottontail or this white-tailed deer. This northern white pine was planted by our homeowners, Deb and Adrian, about 15 to 20 years ago, mixed with other trees, including oak, maple, redbud, and a non-native star magnolia. It now provides a wonderful border along their back fence. So although the white pine is slow to grow as a young seedling, reaching only about a foot in height after 5 years, northern white pine begins to grow rapidly once it is well established, and it can reach 4 to 5 feet tall by the time it is 10 years old. So this large evergreen can eventually reach 100 foot or more. It has graceful horizontal branches that whirl around the trunk. It belongs to the white pine group, which typically have 5 needles in each bundle, and the needles are long, flexible, and soft to the touch. The cones are long and slender, and 5 inches in length or so. They have thin scales and no prickle, which are all characteristics of pines in the white pine group. The scales of the cones may be stained with white sap, giving them a decorative appearance, like a dusting of snow. Don't overlook this tree when selecting a specimen for your yard. You can nurture this tree now and leave a gift for future generations. One of the most ubiquitous and important broadleaf deciduous trees native to New Jersey, and I think it's my favorite species, is the mighty oak. And this particular specimen, named the Salem oak after the county in which it once resided, was a champion tree in New Jersey until its death in 2019. This species is eastern white oak. It was more than 100 foot tall with a trunk circumference of 22 feet and a crown spread of 104 feet. It was over 500 years old, much older than the expected lifetime of a white oak tree, which is about 100 to 200 years old. And if you're interested in New Jersey champion trees, you can visit the NJDEP website listed at the bottom of the slide, or Google NJ champion trees. So not only humans appreciate the longevity and majesty of white oaks, large old trees continue to be an important resource for wildlife within a habitat or a backyard. Pictured here, a great horned owl raises her young owlets in the cavity of an old hollowed out tree. This stately eastern white oak, Quercus alba, has a nice shape to its canopy and lots of room to spread out. It has pale ashy gray bark. It is one of over a dozen species of oak that are native to New Jersey, many of which are commercially available. Like pine, oaks can be divided into two main groups, the red oaks and the white oaks, and you can distinguish between the two groups by looking at the acorns, the leaves, the buds, and the bark. And with a closer look at the leaves here, we can see that the lobes are rounded with smooth tips, which indicate that this oak tree is a member of the white oak group. All oaks produce acorns. White oaks, or oaks in the white group, produce mature acorns every year and contain less tannins than acorns in the red oak group. Acorns are food for wild turkeys and other wildlife. This beautifully shaped tree is a scarlet oak, Quercus coccinea. It is able to grow and maintain this symmetrical shape because it has space. It is not competing for sunlight with other trees in a forest, and therefore it forms a lovely canopy. So space is something you'll want to consider when selecting a tree or shrub for your yard. Scarlet oak is a medium to large tree, often reaching 80 feet. Its native soils are poor and dry, and it is a typical species of upland forests in northern New Jersey. And with a closer look at the leaves, we can see that the leaf lobes are pointy and contain a tiny bristle at each tip. And this is a characteristic of species in the red oak group, to which the scarlet oak species belongs. And scarlet oak offers bright red fall foliage. It takes 2 years for red oaks, or oaks in the red group, to produce mature acorns, which contain more tannins than acorns produced by oak tree species in the white oak group. Other commonly cultivated red oaks include the northern red oak, which is a relatively fast-growing and stately tree, the pin oak, which is a low-maintenance ornamental, commonly planted as a street tree, and the willow oak. Willow oak is one of my favorites. I have several growing in my yard of various ages, and willow oak is predominantly a southern New Jersey species, with a Piedmont coastal plain border defining its northernmost range in the US. It has an unusual, very un-oak-like shape to its leaves, a single narrow blade similar to the shape of a willow tree leaf. It has brownish gray furrowed bark, becoming more deeply furrowed as it matures. It is a medium to large tree and can reach heights between 40 and 80 feet with a spread of 25 to 50 feet. It is commonly planted in yards and on municipal properties and in parks as a shade tree, and it's tolerant of urban pollution. It has a relatively fast growth rate. It prefers a moist, loamy, well-drained soil, but is generally very tolerant of other soil conditions, including clay soils with poor drainage. It prefers full sun, but can tolerate light shade. And although oaks can be susceptible to a large number of diseases, willow oak is considered to have good resistance to pests and is a low maintenance tree that lives a long time. And this blue-headed vireo is gleaning insects from a large willow oak. The oak tree in the background sprang up from an acorn in Deb and Adrian's yard about 15 years ago, a gift from the squirrels. And Deb nurtured it and enjoys this 30 to 40 foot oak tree today. When is the best time to plant an oak tree? 15 years ago. And behind it are a variety of native shrubs lining the fence, a maple to the left, and woodland sunflowers in the foreground. Those woodland sunflowers, Helianthus divaricatus, are about 6 feet tall, blooming now in both sun or shade. So Dr. Doug Tallamy, the University of Delaware entomologist who introduced gardeners to the importance of backyards for nature, emphasizes the value of the oak. And I will echo Dr. Talamy's call. If you plant just one tree in your yard, I encourage you to consider the oak. If your goal is to attract wildlife to your yard, then the oak is your tree. As Dr. Talamy states in his book called Bringing Nature Home, oak trees support over 500 species of caterpillars. This polyphemus moth caterpillar uses oak as one of its host plants. And here it is pupating inside its cocoon wrapped in oak leaves. It started out this tiny and it morphed into this beautiful polyphemus moth. These photos of the caterpillar and moth were taken by Phyllis D'Alessandro, and you can view more of her photos on her Facebook page, My Magic Garden. The 500 plus species of caterpillars that use oak as their host plant provide an important source of food for birds. In early spring, migrating songbirds are desperate for food as they make their long journey north to breed. And like this northern parula, which is a species of warbler, they're looking for tiny caterpillars and other insects to provide them with the fuel that they need to sustain their energy for their long trip. In addition, once the birds have arrived and are nesting and rearing their young, the parents will be out looking for soft, nutritious caterpillars to feed their babies. 96% of our backyard songbirds raise their babies on a strict diet of insect protein. Oak trees support the most species of caterpillars and in turn will support a great majority of our songbird babies. This gray tree frog is sitting on an oak leaf. It spends most of its time high in the trees and is well camouflaged to blend in with the bark. It leaves the safety of the trees to breed in nearby ponds and will readily accept a man-made pond, a vernal pool, or a basin located within deciduous or mixed oak pine woodlands. So by creating habitat in your yard, perhaps in conjunction with your neighbors, you can attract this tiny and special creature. And this particular specimen was living in the very small corridor of mixed pine oak woodland habitat shared with a few adjacent neighbors behind my office building. The American holly is an easily recognizable tree. It is an evergreen, like the pines, but instead of having needle-like leaves, it has broad leaves like the oaks. So interestingly, most holly species in North America are shrubs, and most are deciduous. American holly, Ilex opaca, is a dominant tree in many forest communities throughout New Jersey. However, New Jersey is at the northern border of its range, which stretches south into Florida and west into Texas. It's considered a small to medium tree, reaching heights of 20 to 40 feet. It has a conical upright shape and smooth, pale gray bark. And this black-throated green warbler is gleaning the tree for insects. The female flowers give way to fruit that starts off green, turns yellow, and ripens to red. It is dioecious like the eastern red cedar, so there are plants with only male flowers called staminate flowers and plants with only female flowers called pistillate flowers, and those are the ones that bear the fruit. So these tiny greenish white flowers, they bloom on each year's new growth, and they're very attractive to pollinators. So in early spring, when the flowers are in bloom, I can hear the whole tree buzzing from the sound of small native bees and other beneficial insects that are looking for pollen and nectar. So this blue-gray gnatcatcher comes north to breed, and many raise their families in New Jersey, where they can glean caterpillars and other insects from native American holly trees. The fruit ripens at the end of the summer, It persists throughout the winter, offering a crucial food source for birds when food is scarce. Although the leaves are evergreen, they do cycle through their lifespan and drop to the ground while new ones take their place. The fallen brown leaves of oak and holly provide just the right backdrop for the camouflaged feathers of this ground-nesting chuck-will's widow. A member of the family called nightjars, this beautiful nocturnal bird rests during the day and hunts for insects at night. Leaf litter is essential for the survival of this species, as she depends on the brown, yellow, and cream-colored hues of the dead leaves and fallen sticks and twigs to keep her egg almost invisible on the forest floor. Examples of two fantastic native shrubs in the holly family are winterberry holly, Ilex verticillata, and inkberry holly, Ilex glabra. Both shrubs have a height and spread of about 6 to 10 feet. They prefer acidic soils and moist to wet conditions, although they can both be very tolerant of drier conditions once they're established. They grow in full sun to part shade, and small white flowers bloom in June and July on both shrubs and are attractive to bees and butterflies. Winterberry holly develops bright red berries that cling to the stem throughout the winter, even after the leaves drop on this deciduous shrub. And blackberries develop on inkberry holly and persist throughout the winter, tucked between the evergreen leaves. Both shrubs offer a really good food source for the birds. Both of these lovely shrubs offer color and interest in the winter wildlife garden. And here is winterberry holly growing in Deb and Adrian's backyard landscape. And below the shrubs, the homeowners, Deb and Adrian, placed logs to create a border around their black-eyed Susans and foxglove beard tongue. And the chipmunks use the logs as tunnel expressways. And the decomposing organisms are doing their job to slowly break down the wood and add organic matter to the soil. So you can see there is space under the shrubs, a protective shelter for sparrows that like to scratch on the ground looking for food, yet there's still visibility for Deb and Adrian to observe and enjoy. So amazingly, in this busy suburban development, a red fox has a den just beyond the shrubs in their backyard. So among the hundreds of backyards in the development, the fox chose this yard to live, undoubtedly because it provides habitat, trees, shrubs, perennials, a canopy, and an understory that all offer food, shelter, protection, and a place to raise a family. So cousin of the chuck-will's widow, this common nighthawk pretends she's a gray birch tree during the day. The gray camouflage colors of the bark conceal her presence from predators. Gray birch is one of several birch trees that are native to New Jersey. Considered small trees, gray birch can reach heights between 20 to 40 feet with a spread between 10 and 20 feet. They maintain a slender trunk and a narrow crown. An appealing characteristic of all birch trees is their thin, colorful bark. This distinctive and attractive orange peeling bark of the river birch makes this a commonly cultivated tree. River birch grows to heights between 40 to 70 feet. It's often multi-trunked, has a vase-shaped growth habit and a rounded crown. It is a vigorous and fast-growing tree. It prefers moist, acidic soils and either full sun or part shade. It is the most adaptable of the native birches and can tolerate dry soil, heavy clay, heat, drought, deer, and pollution. The diamond-shaped leaves are about 3 inches across and coarsely toothed around the edges. The tender new stem on which these leaves grow is silver and has a soft, furry texture. Fruiting catkins emerge early in spring, which is an adaptation to their naturally wet floodplain habitat. And in the wild, the seeds drop into the freshly exposed mud, and the receding floodwaters disperse them elsewhere. So here's my neighbor's river birch, which he planted next to his house, I would say about 15 to 20 years ago. And it was probably 10 feet tall or so at the time of purchase. My property is adjacent to his on the right, consisting of a field that I stopped mowing about 10 years ago. And this is the field hidden from the road by that wall of eastern red cedar trees I showed earlier. And consequently, I have a small patch of 3 to 4 river birches growing in that field. They are now about 20 feet tall, and I'm delighted. Another tree that volunteered in my yard, most likely a gift from the birds, is this Sweetgum, liquid ambar styrosiflua. So Sweetgum is a typical plant of the swamps and floodplains of the Piedmont and the hardwood swamp forest of the intercoastal plain where the soil is rich. However, this tree can be found growing throughout our state, and New Jersey is the northern border of its range, which stretches south to Florida and west to Texas. So my property is neither in a floodplain nor a swamp, and this Sweetgum is healthy and happy in my dry, sandy soil. It actually tolerates a wide range of soil conditions, except for alkaline soils. It needs full sun and is intolerant of shade. It is a conical shape when young, as you can see here, but grows a rounded crown as it ages. It is considered a medium to large tree and will reach a height of 60 to 75 feet and has a straight trunk. And it spreads from about 40 to 60 feet, the canopy. So this tree is easily recognized by its stems, leaves, and fruit. Branches and stems have a wing-like corky ridge, which is helpful when identifying the tree in the winter. And the leaves are star-shaped with 5 to 7 pointy fine-toothed lobes. And they turn amazing yellow, purple, red, and orange colors in the fall. So sweetgum trees are monoecious. So they have separate male and female flowers, but they are both found on the same tree. So all trees will have fruit. And on top, you can see the male flowers, the staminate flowers, containing the stamen and the pollen. And hanging down are the female flowers or pistillate flowers containing the sticky stigma, ready to receive the pollen. The female flowers are termed capitulate, which means there are many very small flowers attached to the same point on that flowering stem. And the female flowers are wind pollinated, so the wind blows the pollen from the male flowers on top to the female flowers on the bottom, after which the male flowers wilt and fall to the ground, and the female flowers mature. And I know you know what they look like. So the ovary swells into a pointy gumball fruit, protecting both the fertile seeds where the pollen successfully fertilized the flowers and also the unfertilized seeds whose flowers were not successfully pollinated. However, both seeds contain nutrients for the birds that eat them. So right in the center of the photo, this is Where's Waldo, there's a female red-winged blackbird foraging in a sweetgum tree here. And to the bottom right is a photo of the much more recognizable male. He's showing off his red shoulder patch called an epaulette. So along with the red-winged blackbirds, the finches, the chickadees, the wrens, the sparrows, the quail, and chipmunks, and many other birds and wildlife eat the seeds of the sweetgum tree. So I've heard many folks proclaim that they will never plant a sweetgum tree because it's too difficult to mow under the canopy and the gumballs ruin the lawnmower. And to that I suggest, don't mow under the sweetgum tree. It has a shallow root system and would prefer not to deal with a compacted soil caused by constant mowing. So instead, plant an understory of shrubs and ground covers. So one ground cover is called barren strawberry. I believe Randy Eckel introduced that to our audience at the previous Native Plant Society Wonderful Wednesday program. And its evergreen foliage of the barren strawberry grows to about 6 inches tall and will spread through rhizomes and form a carpet. And it grows in both part shade and full sun. So if you need more convincing to consider a sweet gum for your yard, it is a host plant for more than 30 species of butterfly and moth caterpillars, including this gorgeous Luna moth. So there's the caterpillar stage and the adult moth stage. So companion plants to sweet gum include northern bayberry and winged sumac. They can grow alongside the sweet gum tree, helping to hide the dropped gumballs from sight, and they all require similar conditions: full sun, dry, well-drained soil. They also tolerate some salinity, making them appropriate for coastal areas or near roads that are salted with de-icing salts in the wintertime. So northern bayberry is an upright, multi-trunked, semi-evergreen shrub. It can grow quite large, like this one that I planted way too close to our driveway. But it does make a nice privacy wall. It can be pruned to create a hedge. It thrives in poor soil. It's extremely drought tolerant, although it can also survive in wet soils. It fixes atmospheric nitrogen, which helps it survive in these stressed environments. So it's good for a seaside garden, poor rocky soils, and my backyard where I let nature do the watering. The flowers are dioecious, so male and female plants are on separate, male and female flowers are on separate plants, and you need both to have the female bear the fruit. So here's the male flowers or staminate flowers housing the stamen and pollen. And these are the female flowers getting ready to receive the wind-blown pollen. And they bloom in early spring. They have low water content and are high in lipids. And the fruits remain on the plant well into the winter, providing food for birds. And because of its late winter leaf and fruit retention, it provides good protective cover and food for many species of birds, including bobwhite quail, ruffed grouse, eastern meadowlark, gray catbirds, red-bellied woodpeckers, and migratory swallows. So this flock of tree swallows is descending on this group of northern bayberry shrubs, and they are devouring that fruit before their migration. So northern bayberry is an important host plant for caterpillars of Columbia silk moth and other lepidopteran species. Winged sumac is another important food source for birds. It's generally low in crude protein, fats, and calcium, but nonetheless, it provides a vital food source in fall and winter when food is scarce. It typically grows to about 10 feet, but can reach 20 feet. Like northern bayberry and eastern red cedar, it's a pioneer species, so it grows fairly quickly and moves into disturbed soils. It regenerates vegetatively by sprouting from its root crown, so it can rapidly colonize an area, so keep that in mind for your yard. It does tolerate heat, drought, poor soils, and deer. And the compound leaves contain leaflets with a signature little wing growth between the leaflets, making ID easy. And they turn a bright red in the fall before they drop. Clusters of flowers form at the tips of the stems, and after pollination and fertilization, the berries form, starting out as yellowish green color. At the end of summer, they become bright red, and they linger throughout the winter. American robins rely on the berries during winter. A lot of times we think of robins as migrants, but they actually congregate in the woods where all the berries are: the holly berries, the cedar berries, the winged sumac berries, the northern bayberry berries. So planting these powerhouse food sources in your yard will attract wildlife. So New Jersey tea is another wildlife-friendly native shrub to consider for your yard. It only grows about 3 to 4 feet high. So it's a subshrub. It could be a ground cover. So as you think about layering plants in your yard, like the layers of a forest, New Jersey tea might be considered a good component of your understory. It prefers well-drained sandy, loamy, or loamy soil, acidic soils. And it has showy, fragrant white flowers that bloom May through July. Those flowers are attractive to hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees. And if your yard has a bit more moisture, summer sweet might be a good choice. And it's another favorite understory shrub of mine. It's multi-branched, deciduous. It has dark green aromatic leaves, and it grows in part shade or full shade. And it can grow from 5 to 8 feet tall with a 4 to 6 foot wide spread. It prefers moist, acidic soil, but it does tolerate well-drained sandy soils. I grow them in my yard, this shrub. And it blooms in summer with a really sweet smelling flower. Clusters of white flowers are extremely attractive to pollinators. Butterflies, hummingbirds, native bees, honeybees all value the nectar, and tiny beetles resembling little lightning bugs all congregate on the flowers as well. The flowers are followed by these dried fruit capsules holding the seeds, and the seeds resemble peppercorns. So another common name is sweet pepperbush. And the seed capsules persist throughout the winter, providing food for birds like this American goldfinch. So this is a wildlife-friendly shrub appropriate for borders around your house, as a foundation planting in rain gardens, wildlife gardens, at edges of ponds or other water features, and it's a great understory plant. A similar looking shrub is sweetspire, Itea virginica. South Jersey is actually the northern border of this plant, whose range extends south into Florida and west into Texas. It's multi-branched, slender branched, and mound shaped, and it grows to about 3 to 6 feet, prefers moist acidic soils and full sun to part shade, although I have seen it grow successfully in drier sandy soil, such as my yard. And it flowers best where it receives at least some full sun, at least part of the day, as compared to a spot that is partly shady throughout the day. So another great shrub for yards with moist soil and shade is swamp azalea. Clusters of fragrant pale pink flowers bloom mid-May to July. It's got a very long pink style that reaches out beyond the anthers and gives this flower a really unique and attractive appearance. Another common name for swamp azalea is catchfly azalea, apparently because the glands on the exterior of the closed buds exude a sweet, sticky substance that small flies find attractive. And the open flowers are very attractive to bumblebees. New Jersey has several native azaleas, all in the genus rhododendron, and some are considered very rare in our state. But commercially, you can find swamp azalea, also pinkster flower, and the shrub commonly referred to as rhododendron, Rhododendron maximum. A slender wildlife-friendly tree you may want to consider for your yard is sassafras. And this northern parula, an early spring migrant, is a small warbler who spends the winter in South and Central America. And the sassafras tree is host to numerous moth and butterfly caterpillars and other insect larvae that provide food for migrating birds, such as she. Yellow flowers bloom in spring, April through May, and provide a nectar source for bees. A bright red stem extends to showcase deep purple-blue berries that ripen in September and provide another food source for birds, such as these fruit-loving scarlet tanagers. So the female in the middle is yellow, and the male is bright red with black wings, and he's holding a mulberry in his bill. Another dioecious plant, both male and female sassafras trees are needed to produce the fruit. And it's actually considered a drupe because it contains a single seed. So sassafras has 4 distinct leaf shapes. a typical single blade, a turkey's foot, a leaf, a left mitten, and a right mitten. And the mittens are each separate shapes, so it's not just the leaf flipped over. So this 4-leaf shape characteristic makes sassafras an easy tree to identify. So in the fall, the foliage turns beautiful shades of yellow and orange and scarlet and purple. And the best results for fruit and foliage color are achieved when sassafras is planted in groups. So it is a shrubby tree in its youth, but it can grow dense foliage and a pyramidal shape as it matures, and can even reach heights of 60 feet. But if you don't plant it in groups, the tree may do it for you through suckers and take on the appearance of a large multi-branched shrub. It's easy to grow in dry to moist acidic soils, sandy, clay, or loam, and in full sun or part shade. Although, as I said, if too shady, sassafras will begin to shed its lower branches, bend toward available light, and eventually succumb to full shade. It's a host plant for butterfly and moth caterpillars, who are able to digest toxic chemicals found in the plant's leaves. And these include Promethean moth, pale swallowtail, and spicebush swallowtail. And here's a spicebush swallowtail caterpillar. It starts life out looking like a bird dropping. And as it grows, it begins to look fierce with large black eyes that can see from all angles. Or so it would like for you to believe. The caterpillar's head is actually the small buffy colored round disc below a very menacing looking but fake mouth. So I can see I'm going to go over my time a little bit. I'm going to say probably another 5 to 10 minutes. This spicebush caterpillar is on a spicebush leaf, and spicebush is at the top of my list of beautiful native backyard shrubs. Spicebush prefers part shade, but also grows in full sun and also tolerates heavy shade. So it makes a great understory plant. And it grows between 6 to 12 feet with a 6 to 12 foot spread. And in the wild, it's found growing in moist ravines, valleys, and along streams, but in a backyard setting, the shade helps with preventing the soil from drying out. And I have 2 spicebush shrubs, this being one of them, in my yard. And it's also dioecious with separate male and female plants. And it's one of our earliest blooming flowering shrubs. So it has small yellow flowers that open in March and provide nectar to early emerging insects. And the female flowers that were pollinated and successfully fertilized will ripen into red drupes in the fall. And they provide a food source for birds. So here's the spicebush growing in Debbie and Adrian's backyard landscape. And it overhangs a small water pond at the edge of the lawn. And this is their most recent addition to their wildlife sanctuary, small tubs of water hosting native aquatic plants. So by digging a hole the size of the tub, she dropped them into the ground. Frogs, toads, dragonflies, and birds all benefit from these easy to maintain water features. So as I mentioned earlier, spicebush is a host plant for the spicebush swallowtail caterpillar, but it also hosts the eastern tiger swallowtail. But here I want to show that the spicebush swallowtail pupa resembles a leaf. And here it is a gorgeous butterfly. So you can attract this swallowtail to your yard with proper trees and shrubs. So Debbie and Adrian also have red chokeberry growing in their landscape. To the left, next to their winterberry holly, as you may recall, over the black-eyed Susans. So the berries are not yet ripe, but they will be in the fall, and they'll be a source of food for birds. So there are several native deciduous shrubs in the genus Aronia, and pictured here is Aronia arbutifolia, which is red chokeberry, and it can grow about 6 to 12 feet tall And the white flowers have bright pink anthers, really beautiful. And they bloom in spring, followed by red berries in the winter. Another commonly cultivated backyard species is Aronia melanocarpa, which is black chokeberry, and that's smaller, growing to only 3 to 6 feet. And it gets black berries that are food for birds, but the berries do not persist in the winter on Aronia melanocarpa, black chokeberry. Both plants prefer full sun to part shade and tolerate a range of soils. As you can probably tell from the flowers, chokeberry is in the rose family. And another member of the rose family is this spring flowering tree, wild black cherry. And this old black cherry tree in my yard is about 40 years old and more than 40 feet tall. Some can grow taller, up to 80, even 100 feet tall. And small white flowers appear in clusters in the spring. The leaves actually contain a cyanide-forming toxic compound, which means there's likely a specialist caterpillar who can eat them. So native cherry trees such as this one are much touted by Dr. Doug Tallamy, as was the oak. And here's one of the specialists. So wild black cherry is a favorite host plant for the Cecropia moth caterpillar, which is a beautiful shade of green marked with blue, orange, and yellow. And they can grow quite large, like this one, measuring over 4 inches. And when they're ready to pupate, it wraps itself in the leaves of the host plant, such as these wild black cherries, and morphs into a strikingly beautiful Cecropia moth. So here's the adult Cecropia moth on the bark of the wild black cherry. So recall our beautiful Polyphemus moth whose caterpillar was eating the oak. So another host plant for this butterfly's larva is maple. So this migrating golden-crowned kinglet is foraging on a maple tree, red maple, looking for caterpillars and other insects that overwintered on this tree. So red maple is one of the earliest flowering trees. And as the red flowers emerge in March and April, it becomes very easy to identify. So any new emerging growth on red maple, including the fruit, the twigs, and the leaf stalks, are all bright red. So here's the bright red fruit called samaras. And after they've matured, they fall off the tree and twirl or helicopter to the ground. And the bark is smooth and gray. And like many trees and shrubs, the bark is host to lichen, which does not harm the tree. The leaves of red maple are relatively small and have a triangular shape. And you can see the red stem on each of the leaves, which is a lovely contrast. So this Polyphemus moth caterpillar is dining on the red maple leaves. It would make a formidable meal for this juvenile eastern bluebird. So when it's ready to pupate, as it did with the oak leaves, and as the Cecropia caterpillar did with the black cherry leaves, this Polyphemus caterpillar will wrap itself in the leaves of the red maple for protection while it undergoes its metamorphosis. And in fall, red maple leaves turn beautiful shades of orange and red. And when the leaves drop to the ground, there's a possibility a Polyphemus moth pupa may be among them. So this is an important reason why we should leave the leaves. If possible, rake your leaves to one area of your yard or under your shrubs or into your garden beds to use as an insulating winter blanket for your perennials. And the leaves will eventually break down, adding important organic matter to your soil, and the Polyphemus moth will eclose. And there it is again. So red maple is tolerant of a wide range of soils, but prefers moist, acidic, well-drained soil and grows in full sun or part shade. So it grows to about 40 to 70 feet tall with a 30 to 50 foot spread, and it makes a lovely shade tree and can be used in or near a rain garden. It grows faster than sugar maple, but slower than silver maple. So here's sugar maple. It's native to northern New Jersey forests. It's not a coastal or coastal plain species. It is easily grown in average to moist, well-drained soils in full sun or part shade, and it can tolerate heavy shade. It does best, however, in slightly acidic fertile soils in full sun. It does not tolerate compaction, poorly drained soils, pollution, or road salt. And here are the samaras of the sugar maple. And sugar maple will make a beautiful large shade tree for your North Jersey yard. So Native Americans taught colonists how to tap these trees to make maple syrup, which is now a billion-dollar industry. So sugar maple's gorgeous yellow and orange autumn colors are responsible for giving New England its reputation for spectacular fall foliage. And silver maple, as I said, is predominantly silver maple, different tree, is predominantly a northern New Jersey species, although there are some native populations in South Jersey. This one tolerates a wide range of soils, but prefers moist, acidic soil. It's fairly drought tolerant once established. It prefers full sun or partial shade, and it grows at a very fast rate. It can actually put on 1 to 2 feet in height per year. However, fast-growing trees can sometimes be susceptible to breakage and heavy winds. In the spring, it produces clusters of flowers that form red and yellow colored samaras. They're the largest seeds of all maples in New Jersey. And the leaves are what give this tree its name. The deep lobes provide a beautiful triangular shape, and as they flutter in the wind, the silver underside produces an attractive effect. So another favorite tree, redbud, is small, shrub-like, and it can mix well as an understory plant with many of the previous shrubs and trees we talked about. It prefers moderately rich soil with regular moisture, although it too can tolerate drier soils once established. And it has beautiful pink flowers in early spring, a nectar source for early emerging bees, butterflies, and moths. It has heart-shaped leaves that cover the branches, turning yellow in the fall. Redbud does not like to be transplanted, so choose your planting site carefully. Okay, almost done. The Blackburnian warbler that's perched here is on a familiar tree, the beautiful flowering dogwood. And with its beautiful spring blooming white or pink flowers and bright red berries enjoyed by the birds, I'm sure this is a favorite of many of you. And like redbud, it's a small tree, a perfect specimen for small yards, or as part of an understory level of your backyard ecosystem. But you may not be as familiar with its cousin, the red-twigged dogwood. So this shrub is showcased in the front of this small garden. It has beautiful red branches and twigs, providing winter interest in your garden. And it likes moist, fertile soil. However, one volunteered in my dry yard, a gift from the birds, I'm sure, and it's doing marvelous in my dry, sandy soil in full sun. In fact, it's now about 10 to 12 feet tall or so. So I will add that this shrub is tolerant of drier conditions. And this is my shrub flowering. Fragrant flat-topped clusters of flowers. They bloom in late spring, May through June. And here they are, followed by small berries that begin green and ripen into a whitish or bluish white berry that are attractive to the birds, very attractive to the birds. And they actually also bloom intermittently throughout the summer. So the last plant I will showcase is buttonbush, and this 10 to 12 foot shrub, it naturally grows in wetlands, where this one is growing at Wells Mills County Park in Waretown, New Jersey. However, it is tolerant of drier conditions, and I know this because I threw some seeds onto my dry soil here in Ocean County, New Jersey, and those seeds I actually got from the Native Plant Society of New Jersey's annual Fall Conference Seed Swap, And a few years later, I kind of forgot about them, they began to germinate and grow into a small grouping of buttonbush shrubs. And I had flowers for the first time last year, just a few, and this year my shrub is just bursting with flowers. I'm amazed. And the bees and butterflies are all over it. So needless to say, plants can be very tenacious, hardy, and sometimes unpredictable in their levels of tolerance. So there's so many more beautiful native wildlife friendly trees and shrubs that I would love to show you, but you can explore on your own. And your best bet for success is to plant the right plant in the right place. So get a soil test, check your soil's moisture, determine how much sun different areas of your yard receives, write up a plan or sketch a design, and choose carefully and plant carefully. So native plants that host caterpillars and other insects, ones with berries, nuts, and seeds, are going to attract and support local wildlife. So remember to offer animals food, places to dine, places to relax, places to forage, places to nest, places to feed and be fed, places to perch, places to hide, and places to seek. And enjoy your very own wildlife sanctuary. So thank you so much for attending. And I do want to give a huge thanks to all of these wonderful photographers who contributed: Carmela Moneta, Phyllis D'Alessandro of My Magic Garden, Debbie Beer and Adrienne Binns, who shared photos of their backyard, Jessica Howland, Chelsea Hockenberry, Lisa Mazuka, and German Georgieff, the naturalist at Wells Mills County Park, who helped me identify some of the oak leaves. So thanks so much. I'm going to share my screen again and see if anybody has any questions. So hello there.
So you have a lot of questions.
Oh no.
But that's okay. I answered
Already
some of them.
Okay. I think I really kind of tore through that pretty quickly.
Oh no, there you didn't. It was excellent. You have a lot of very, very positive comments saying how wonderful it was, thanking you. Excellent.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining me. And I am so grateful that you are taking an interest in the program, taking an interest in native plants and how to create an ecosystem in your yard so that you can support our wildlife, because they certainly do support us. They support us, our very lives.
So one of the questions that I didn't answer came in near the end. It was, can you comment on pyramid dogwood?
Pyramid dogwood. I don't know that species. Maybe was I referencing the shape of the tree? I talked about a little bit about flowering dogwood, which is a small tree. It's probably about the size of a redbud, maybe grows to 15 feet. It can be pink flowering or white flowering, early spring flowers, gets red berries that feed the birds. The other dogwood was the red-twigged dogwood, and that's a shrub. And that's the one that I have growing in my yard, and I showcased the beautiful flowers that then turn into the kind of greenish berries that ripen into a white color that also are very attractive to birds. That's the one that the bird actually gave me. Birds gave me that gift. So both of those grow, I believe, throughout New Jersey. I don't think one or the other is specific to North or South, if I recall correctly. I can look at my notes. But certainly, even though some of these trees are specific to North or South Jersey, for example, the sugar maple is specific to North Jersey, the white pine is specific to North Jersey, but as you may know, white pine has been planted everywhere and does just fine here in South Jersey. But if you want to be super native, to not only plant natives of New Jersey, but plant natives of your region, then like white pine would be north, sugar maple would be north, willow oak would be south. So that's all I got for that answer.
Someone is asking a very broad question, just whether you have any experience with American hazelnut.
Oh, I don't personally have any experience with American hazelnut. There's so many trees I wanted to talk about. Shagbark hickory and pignut hickory and basswood, linden tree, that I obviously didn't have time to squeeze in this program. And but I encourage you to do further research, and I encourage you to email me and share what you've come up with. That's at jerseyshore@npsnj.org. Karen and I both get those emails. We'd love to hear from you.
Another question was about the American hollies. Someone asked, well, here's what they said. My American hollies absorb lots of water and I have trouble finding something I can plant underneath. Any ideas for a ground cover underneath American?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I'm trying to picture, there's a beautiful holly forest not far from my house. It's actually right along the coast. It's comes right up to the edge of the marsh, so they are salt tolerant. And the understory of the holly forest is very bare, and I don't think that's because of the deer. I think it's just because of the way that tree grows. Maybe there's something in the leaves, I don't know, kind of like walnut. Lots of plants can't tolerate whatever chemical it is that black walnuts give off in the soil. So I'm stumped, so to speak, what to plant under hollies. A lot of hollies will actually have low branches. I like to keep those low branches on my holly trees. A lot of people like to trim them up to make more of a shade tree, I guess. But then, you walk on the prickly leaves. So, but holly is definitely a favorite tree. As you saw, the Chuck Will's widow was nesting in an oak holly forest on the forest floor among the leaves. So sometimes it's okay to not have an understory under, a particular tree or a particular area in your yard. And it's not that you have to plant exactly like a forest with ground cover, perennials, shrub, and then tree all on top of each other. But if you have those components within your yard, somewhere within your yard, you're still providing that those layers necessary for different species to utilize. I'm really good at avoiding these questions.
Well, some of them are really good.
That's good.
Interesting question. So this one came in near the beginning, but it was about arrowwood viburnum.
Okay.
Someone planted one just this past spring, but didn't get any flowers or berries yet. Mm-hmm. So they're wondering, does it just take a few years to mature, or do they need a male pollinator?
Oh, good question. Well, first of all, definitely trees, plants, trees and shrubs in particular take time to mature, so become sexually mature, be able to bear fruit. So give your viburnum a little more time, a couple more years. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking that, now I'll backtrack on my answer. I was going to say, I'm thinking that viburnum might not be dioecious, so you don't need a male or female plant, but so many of our trees and shrubs are. So I'd have to look that up.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on that because I did try to look it up while,
good.
During the talk. So what I found was that it is monoecious, not dioecious, but they said sometimes if you have a cultivar planted, you might need to put in a plant from a different cultivar because it, even though you have the male and female in the same plant, you need the pollen coming from another
Huh.
plant, if that makes any sense. I was
Yeah.
trying to understand it. That's why I didn't give the answer, because it's not dioecious, but sometimes you do have to plant a cultivar from a different cultivar in order for it to
Okay.
cross-pollinate. I didn't have time to really like
The question
get a
for
full explanation of
horticulturalists.
why, but
But do know that Jessie Connor, she is one of the co-leaders for the Southeast chapter in South Jersey. She created a beautiful video that is on the Native Plant Society's webpage, talking all about viburnums. It's a short, quick video, and I think she highlights maybe three, 4, or 5 different viburnums, and talks a little bit about their needs and features, you know, their flowers, and shares information. So check that out on the Native Plant Society website. I think it's on the homepage.
someone did ask, there was a tall post in some of the photos with a box on top and a cylinder on the pole. What is it?
So this is the yard where you would have seen that. I think, oh no, I know that. I know what you're talking about. So behind the Sweetgum tree, really, really tall post with a box at the top. That's for a screech owl, and the cylinder is there to keep raccoons, predominantly raccoons, out, and it works because we've had that box for probably, gosh, definitely at least 5 years now, if not 6 or 7 even. And almost every year we get screech owls in that box. And in fact, I woke up at about 4 o'clock in the morning 2 mornings ago and heard the screech owl calling. I was really excited. So they're back. So they usually come fall, and we have had one, and then we know we've had at least 2 because one was a gray morph and one was a red morph, so we can actually tell there's 2 different owls in the box. But we've never had babies, not in our box. But I encourage you, even the smallest yard, I promise you, if you put up a nest box on a tall pole with a baffle, you will get a screech owl. They are here in our suburban neighborhoods and pockets in urban areas. We just don't know it because they're nocturnal, so we're not out there looking or seeing. But it's a really fun, and of course we put the pole in, we could see it right from our kitchen window, so it's really fun to watch in the evening. You see the little owl perched in the hole, and then it flies out. We check what time each night. So, but this yard you're looking at is, this is actually my sister's yard, Debbie, and her partner, Adrian, and they have a magnificent yard and have all kinds of nest boxes and different hardscapes in their yard to attract wildlife.
Okay, someone is asking about locust trees. They say they have very large ones in their yard. They bloom early in the year, but are very brittle, and they are, in high wind conditions. She's asking if they are host trees for any, or do they attract any wildlife?
That's a really good question. I don't know much about locust trees. I think, and Karen, you would probably know, honey locust is our native one, is that right? And black locust is our non-native invasive one. And who they attract, I do not know.
Yeah.
I feel like they are very attractive to bees and insect pollinators. But I don't know about caterpillars.
Someone asked, can you recommend a shrub for dry partial shade?
What is it? Dry
part shade.
Part shade. Let's see. Well, thinking about all the shrubs I talked about, the northern bayberry is a powerhouse. That was that huge one that I planted next to my driveway. Wrong place. It grew enormous. and it tolerates both dry and wet areas. And it can tolerate both full sun as well as part shade. It can also be pruned into a hedge, which is nice. It is dioecious, so you need male and female to get those little gray kind of waxy berries that the birds love and the tree swallows were descending upon. Spicebush. Spicebush is a really awesome understory tree, shade or part shade. And that's the one that is host to the Spicebush swallowtail. So that's a great tree. Let's see. The chokeberry. So the red chokeberry and its cousin, the black chokeberry, do well in either full sun or part shade. They also tolerate a range of soils, clay, sand. They both have berries that feed the birds. The red chokeberry is the one that gets pretty large. The black chokeberry only gets to be about 3 to 4 feet, whereas the red chokeberry, I think the red chokeberry is pictured in this. If you can see my mouse, I believe that might be the red chokeberry right there. And this plant, I did not talk about this really beautiful one right here. This is cranberry bush viburnum that you can see the red berries on this nice shrub. So when they moved in this house, there was a fence line here and there's nothing growing on it. I think that was probably 10 to 12 years ago, 15 years ago. And so Deb planted all these native shrubs and just exploded with this wall of natives. And she started planting more shrubs, and Adrian is extremely creative and added all these features. And as I mentioned, these tubs of water with these native plants are their newest addition to their yard. And they will attract toads and other critters that need water, dragonflies. So that's kind of a fun feature, and it's small. So if you can't put a whole entire pond in your yard or don't want to maintain a whole pond in your yard, that's a great alternative.
So someone actually commented back to the question about what might be a good ground cover under holly. Dorothy, she said she, with her husband, they have a mini farm in coastal Rhode Island, which borders an oak holly forest. And she said some of the companions growing underneath that she sees are native spring ephemerals like bleeding heart, Jacob's ladder. Also ground covers like creeping wintergreen and many ferns do well under the holly trees that she's familiar with. So good suggestions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you.
And actually several people asked the same question, which I answered to a few of them. They're asking about the sunken tubs of water, don't they attract mosquitoes? And I responded with it all has to do with the depth. It should be 2 feet or more because they like to lay their eggs in shallow water. And I also suggested using mosquito dunks. So a couple more of the same questions, and maybe Becky, you have something to add, I don't.
So yeah, so I was thinking that would come up. Deb and Adrian put little fish in these little pools of water, just kind of see what would happen, because the fish would, of course, would eat the mosquito larva. I don't know that they actually survived, and my suggestion was not to put fish in there because then they would eat any frogs' eggs, and I think it would be really cool to have frogs come to the little ponds. But yes, so the mosquito dunks are a good idea. Or yeah, I was gonna say netting wouldn't really work and it wouldn't look very, very nice.
Yeah, mosquito dunks have BT. That's a bacterium that's toxic to the mosquito larvae, but harmless to other wildlife. So it's not something toxic that you would be putting in there.
Excellent. That's a
Someone
good.
asked, what would be a good native ground cover to replace a lawn?
Oh, we need Randy Eckel, and
The,
she had,
the,
she did that
the,
wonderful ground cover program.
the
Last
one that I always think of is Carex pennsylvanica, because especially if you want it to look like grass,
Yeah.
because it's a sedge that's very grass-like, and you only have to mow it a couple times a year. So, and it does really good in even in shade, which turf grass does not.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, and someone did chime in about the mosquitoes again. This is another good idea. If you put something in like a small pump or a spray feature in the water that keeps the water circulating, that also
Great idea.
discourages, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
mosquitoes. The questions keep coming in. Let's see.
Karen, if you want, you can turn your video on.
I can. That's all right. Let's see if I missed any. This was a great audience. You had such wonderful questions.
We still have 130 people. That's amazing. And it's already past, it's 8:30.
Oh yeah. You had at one point I saw you had 284. It might have even gone up after that because I was not checking it, but
Well, I'm excited for the interest. That's wonderful. So while you're sorting through the questions, I'll just point out, look at this log on the left-hand side. And Deb and Adrian planted little tiny plants in that log right there. It's so cute. They just have a lot of creativity with creating brush piles, which are really great for birds to dive in if there happens to be a sharp-shinned hawk in the area, or a Cooper's hawk, or adding, logs that have an interesting shape, or lots of different features that are natural features that they, might find, or, after this most recent storm, a lot of branches came down from my trees, and so I added them to my brush pile, which is great. Protection for the birds.
I think you covered a lot of people I think are starting to sign up and just thanking you.
Well, you're so very welcome, and thank you all. Thank you for joining, and enjoy your yard, your wildlife sanctuary. I'm very excited for you to either create one or be inspired by some of the photos here. Hopefully you're walking away with some new ideas, and send us photos. Karen and I, we both work for agencies that collaborate together, and it's part of the Jersey Friendly Yards initiative. And we always love receiving photos through that Facebook page, Jersey Friendly Yards Facebook page. As I mentioned earlier, the Native Plant Society has a Facebook page. You can share photos there. So send us an email, jerseyshore@npsnj.org. Share your stories. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you, Karen. And much thanks to Millie Ling, who sets up all these webinars on behalf of the Native Plant Society. And that's a lot of work to do. So thank you so much, Millie, for that. And thanks to the Native Plant Society board for supporting these monthly programs.
Thanks, Becky. That was
Right.
wonderful as always.
So signing off.
Later. I was busy answering questions and I think I missed half of it. So I'm going to watch the recording so I can relax and enjoy it.
Excellent. Me too.
Yeah, that's right.
Good.